When my father passed away, it felt like my whole world cracked open. He had been my rock, my steady hand through every storm life threw at me. I was 20 at the time, just starting to figure out what adulthood meant, and losing him left me feeling untethered. But in his will, he left me something that I thought would help me hold on a place to belong. Our family home. The house where I'd grown up, where every corner was filled with memories of better days. A place that felt safe. At first, it seemed like that home would be the one thing keeping me grounded. I remember reading the letter Dad had written to accompany the will. His words were simple, but they carried so much love. I want you to always have a roof over your head, a place where you feel at peace. This house is yours now. Make it your own. I clutched that letter like it was a lifeline, like maybe his handwriting could somehow make the loss hurt less. But what I didn't see coming was how quickly everything would change after he was gone. My mom had always been distant with me, even when Dad was alive. They'd grown apart over the years, and after he passed, it was like she saw his absence as a kind of freedom. Within months, she started dating someone new. His name was Greg, and from the moment I met him, I felt like I was an outsider in my own life. Greg had two kids from a previous marriage, a boy a few years younger than me and a girl who was still in high school. I tried to be polite, tried to welcome them, but there was always this tension, like I was the one intruding. At first, Mom said she just wanted Greg and his kids to visit now and then. But visits turned into overnight stays, and overnight stays turned into them bringing over more and more of their things. Before long, Greg's kids were there more often than not, and it felt like they were slowly taking over the space that was supposed to be mine. The house I'd inherited, the house Dad had left to me. I remember the day it all came to a head. I came home from work, a part-time job I was juggling while going to school, and found Greg's son setting up a drum set in what had been my dad's study. The study I'd kept untouched because it still smelled like him, still felt like him. My stomach dropped, and I asked what he was doing. He just shrugged and said, "Your mom said I could have this room." I stood there in shock, looking around at the boxes stacked against the walls, my dad's books shoved aside, his desk covered in someone else's things. That night, I confronted Mom. I told her that the house was mine, that Dad had left it to me for a reason. She didn't even look guilty. She just sighed, like I was being unreasonable. "You don't need all this space," she said. "Greg's kids need rooms. You're hardly ever here anyway. It's not fair to them." I tried to remind her that this was the home Dad had wanted me to have. But she waved me off, telling me I was being selfish, that it was time for me to move on with my life and let her have this fresh start with her new family. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want to turn my grief into a battleground. But little by little, I felt myself being pushed out. My bedroom became a shared space for storage. The living room started to fill with furniture that wasn't ours. The kitchen felt foreign, filled with things I didn't recognize. And the worst part was how invisible I felt. Like I didn't belong anymore in the place that was supposed to be my sanctuary. Eventually, the tension became too much. One evening, after another argument where Mom told me I was making things difficult, she said it outright. "Maybe it's best if you find somewhere else to stay. Greg's kids need stability. You're old enough to figure it out." And just like that, I was cast out of the house my dad had left me. I remember packing my bags in silence, trying not to let her see how much it hurt. I moved into a tiny apartment with a friend, barely able to afford rent, working extra shifts just to get by. I thought about fighting it legally. After all, the house was mine on paper. But I kept hearing Dad's voice in my head, the one that always urged me to choose kindness over conflict, to rise above. I didn't want to drag his memory into a courtroom. And part of me was just too tired. Grief and betrayal together can make even the strongest person feel weak. In the months that followed, I tried to focus on rebuilding. I finished school. I worked hard. I made a life for myself outside the walls of that house. But the ache of what had happened never fully went away. Every time I passed by the old neighborhood, I felt a pull in my chest, a longing for what had been taken from me, not just the house, but the sense of security, of belonging. Years went by, and slowly, I learned to let go. The house was just a place, I told myself. What really mattered were the values Dad had given me, the strength to stand on my own, the integrity to choose the high road even when it cost me. I built a new home, not as grand as the one I'd grown up in, but filled with love, with honesty, with people who chose me as much as I chose them. Looking back now, I see that losing the house taught me something important, that home isn't always a structure with walls and a roof. Home is where you're seen, where you're valued, where you're safe to be who you are. And sometimes, we have to create that space for ourselves when others fail us. If I could speak to my mom today, I'd tell her that I forgave her not for her sake, but for mine. Carrying anger was a weight I didn't want anymore. And if I could speak to my dad, I'd tell him thank you. Thank you for trusting me, for leaving me something that taught me so much about resilience, about loss, about starting over. Because in the end, what I inherited from him wasn't just a house. It was the strength to build a life on my own terms. Time kept moving, whether I was ready for it or not. Days turned into months, months into years. I worked hard, pouring myself into my career. At first, it was mostly out of necessity. I needed to survive, to pay rent, to afford groceries, but over time, it became something more. Work gave me purpose. It gave me a sense of accomplishment that no one could take from me. I built a small but meaningful life, brick by brick, choice by choice. There were lonely nights, of course. Nights when I lay awake and wondered how things might have been different if Mom had chosen me. Nights when I imagined what it would have felt like to come home to that house, to fill it with my own family, my own memories. But over time, those nights became fewer. They dulled, replaced by something quieter, acceptance, maybe. Or simply the recognition that life doesn't always go the way we plan, and that's okay. I didn't speak to Mom much during those first years. We became strangers, living parallel lives that rarely crossed. Sometimes, I'd get updates through mutual friends or extended family how she and Greg had renovated the kitchen, how Greg's kids were thriving, how they took vacations I'd never been invited on. Each bit of news felt like a tiny paper cut at first, but eventually, even those stopped stinging. I had my own path to walk. And walk it I did. I found joy in small things, weekend hikes, quiet mornings with coffee, books that transported me to other worlds. I built friendships that felt like family. I learned to cook, to garden, to fix a leaky faucet without calling for help. I took pride in these small victories. They were mine, earned by my own hands. Then, one spring, something unexpected happened. I met someone. Her name was Emily, and she had this quiet strength about her, the kind that didn't need to announce itself. We met at a friend's gathering, and what started as casual conversation turned into long walks, shared meals, and eventually, love. With Emily, I felt seen. Really seen. She didn't care about the ghosts in my past. She cared about the person standing in front of her, the person I'd worked so hard to become. Together, we built a home, not just a house, but a home. It wasn't big or fancy. A small two-bedroom with a tiny backyard and creaky floors. But it was ours. We filled it with laughter, with late-night talks, with dreams for the future. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. I felt like I belonged. One day, out of the blue, Mom called. I almost didn't answer. The number popped up on my phone, and my thumb hovered over the screen. But something, curiosity maybe, or the lingering hope for closure, made me pick up. Her voice was hesitant, unfamiliar in its uncertainty. She said she'd been thinking about me, that she missed me, that she wanted to reconnect. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to hang up, to protect the life I'd built from the hurt she'd caused. But another part of me, the part Dad had nurtured, the part that always leaned toward kindness, told me to listen. We met for coffee. The conversation was awkward at first, full of starts and stops, of long silences and nervous glances. But slowly, we found our rhythm. She admitted she'd made mistakes, that she'd been blinded by her own need for a fresh start, that she hadn't seen how much she was hurting me. And for the first time, I believed her. Not because her words were perfect, they weren't, but because she looked me in the eye and owned what she'd done. Forgiveness didn't come all at once. It's not a switch you can flip. But that day, I took the first step toward it. Not for her sake, but for mine. I realized that carrying the weight of resentment had shaped so much of my life, and I was tired of it. I wanted to be free of it, to let it go so I could fully embrace the happiness I'd found. Over time, we rebuilt something resembling a relationship. Not what it could have been, too much had happened for that, but something new, something honest. She met Emily, and I could see the regret in her eyes for all she'd missed. But she tried. And that mattered. One autumn afternoon, as Emily and I sat on our porch, watching the leaves fall, I thought about Dad. About the house he'd left me, and the lesson I'd learned. That house was never meant to be where my story ended. It was just where it began. What I inherited wasn't walls and a roof, it was strength, resilience, and the reminder that home is what we create with the people who choose us, who stand by us, who see us. And in that moment, I felt grateful. Grateful for the journey, for the struggles that shaped me, for the love I'd found, for the home I'd built with my own two hands. If Dad could see me now, I think he'd be proud. Time passed, as it always does. The sharp edges of my pain smoothed over, worn down by the quiet consistency of daily life. Emily and I built something steady, something beautiful. We weren't perfect, no one is, but we faced the world together, and that was enough. We celebrated small victories, her promotion at work, the little garden we managed to keep alive, the first time we hosted Thanksgiving dinner in our cozy home. We found joy in the ordinary. Eventually, Emily and I talked about starting a family of our own. I was nervous. I wondered if the ghosts of my past would haunt the way I raised a child. I didn't want to repeat the mistakes that had been made with me, the feeling of being cast aside, of being unseen. But Emily reminded me, gently, that just wanting to do better was already the first step. And so, with equal parts hope and fear, we took that leap. When our daughter was born, I held her in my arms and felt something inside me shift. It was as if every crack left by my mother's choices, every scar from feeling unwanted, was suddenly filled with love so fierce it stole my breath. In that moment, I promised her, and myself, that I would always choose her, that I would always make sure she felt safe, and seen, and loved. That no house, no inheritance, no material thing would ever matter more than she did. Raising her became the greatest adventure of my life. The sleepless nights, the first steps, the scraped knees, the bedtime stories, I cherished it all. I found myself reliving pieces of my childhood through her eyes, but this time, I had the power to change the ending. When she fell, I was there to catch her. When she doubted herself, I was there to remind her of her worth. When she dreamed, I was there to believe in those dreams with her. Over the years, Mom became part of our lives again, not in the way she once might have hoped, but in a quieter, gentler way. She visited, she offered help where she could, she tried to make amends in the small ways that were left to her. I saw in her the weight of regret, and though it didn't erase the past, I respected her effort to face it. I let her be a grandmother, and in doing so, I found some peace. Sometimes, late at night, when the house was still and the only sound was the soft breathing of my family asleep around me, I would think about the old house. I'd imagine walking through its rooms, touching the worn banister, standing at the window where I used to watch the seasons change. But now, those memories didn't hurt the way they once did. They felt like pages in an old, beloved book, a story that helped shape me, but one I no longer needed to reread to understand who I was. Instead, I focused on the home Emily and I created. Our daughter's drawings taped to the fridge, the worn couch where we cuddled during movie nights, the backyard where we planted trees that grew taller with each passing year. This was my inheritance. This was what I would leave behind, a legacy of love, of resilience, of choosing kindness even when it was hard. One summer evening, as the sun set and bathed the world in gold, I sat on the porch with my daughter. She was older now, wise beyond her years in that way children sometimes are. She looked up at me and asked, "Daddy, what makes a house a home?" I smiled. thinking of all it had taken me to learn the answer. It's the people in it, I told her. It's the love you share, the memories you make, the way you take care of each other. A house is just walls and a roof. But a home, that's where your heart lives. And as I watched her take in my words, I felt that familiar warmth, the quiet certainty that, no matter how my story began, I had found my place in the world. I had built my own home stronger than any foundation of brick or stone. And in that home, I was exactly where I was meant to be. As the years passed, I watched my daughter grow into someone thoughtful, kind, and curious about the world. With every milestone, her first day of school, her first scraped knee, her first heartbreak, I felt grateful that I could be there for her in ways I had once wished someone had been for me. She taught me as much as I taught her. Through her eyes, I learned to see the world with wonder again. Through her trust, I learned to trust myself. Emily and I worked hard to create a life that felt stable, but more importantly, a life that felt honest. There was no pretending, no unspoken resentments, no walls between us. We built a home full of small rituals that anchored us: Sunday pancakes, reading together on stormy afternoons, tending to the garden even when weeds tried to take over. These things weren't grand, but they mattered. They were the threads that wove us together. One autumn, something happened that I hadn't expected. I received a letter from a lawyer, one representing my mother's estate. Greg had passed away a few years earlier, and now my mother's health was failing. She had arranged to leave me the old house, the house that had been mine all along, and yet never truly mine. I sat with that letter for a long time, my mind filled with memories both sweet and bitter. I thought about my dad's study, about the creak of the floorboards in the hallway, about the sound of rain on the roof at night. But I also thought about the nights I'd spent lying awake, feeling invisible within my own home, the ache of being pushed aside. Emily found me sitting on the porch, the letter still unopened on my lap. She didn't say anything at first, just sat with me, her hand in mine. When I finally spoke, I told her everything that was swirling inside me: the confusion, the anger that still lingered, the pull of nostalgia, the fear that stepping inside that house again would reopen old wounds. "What do you want to do?" she asked gently. And I realized I didn't know. Part of me wanted to burn that letter, to leave the past where it belonged. But another part of me, the part that had always tried to heal, wanted to see the house one last time, to decide for myself what it meant to me now. So, I went back. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The yard was overgrown, the paint peeling, the windows streaked with years of rain and dust. But as I stepped inside, the memories came rushing back: my father's laughter echoing down the hall, the smell of his coffee in the morning, the warmth of the sun streaming through my bedroom window. And yes, the darker memories too, of the slammed doors, the arguments, the nights I'd felt so alone. I walked through each room slowly, touching the walls, breathing in the scent of old wood and faded memories. And as I did, something shifted. The house didn't feel like a monument to loss anymore. It felt like a chapter one had finished, one that had shaped me but didn't define me. In the end, I decided not to keep it. I didn't want to cling to a place that no longer felt like home. Instead, I sold it and used the money to create something new: a scholarship fund in my father's name, to help kids who, like me, had faced loss and needed a hand to build a future. It felt right. It felt like turning grief into something good. When I told Emily and our daughter about it, they hugged me, and in their arms, I felt lighter. I realized that home had never been about bricks or beams. It had always been about the people who chose to stay, the love that filled the spaces between us, the life we built together one day at a time. Now, when I sit on our porch and watch the sun set over the trees, I don't think about what was taken from me. I think about what I've built. I think about the laughter in our kitchen, the warmth in our living room, the dreams we nurture under our roof. And I know, truly know, that I am home. In the months after I sold the house, I felt something unfamiliar: peace. Not the fleeting kind that comes and goes with quiet moments, but a lasting peace, born from knowing I had finally closed that chapter the right way. The house no longer loomed over my memories like a shadow. It simply became what it had always been, a place where my story had begun, but not where it ended. My mother's health declined quickly after that. The call came on a gray winter morning. A nurse from the care facility told me Mom had asked to see me. I hesitated. Old wounds don't always heal just because time passes, and I wasn't sure I was ready to face her. But Emily squeezed my hand and reminded me gently, maybe she needs to say goodbye. Maybe you need it too. So I went. Seeing her after so long was strange. She looked smaller somehow, more fragile than I remembered. The strength I had once seen in her, the strength that had made decisions I couldn't understand, seemed to have ebbed away. She smiled when she saw me, and it wasn't the smile of a woman trying to hide behind pride or justification. It was the smile of a mother who simply missed her son. We talked. Not about the big things, not at first. We spoke about the weather, about Emily, about my daughter. She asked questions, and I could see she was trying to picture the life I'd built without her. And finally, after a long pause, she said the words I hadn't known I needed. I'm sorry. I thought I was doing what was best at the time. I see now how much I hurt you. I hope one day you can forgive me. It wasn't dramatic. There were no tears, no grand gestures. Just a quiet truth, spoken too late to change the past, but early enough to soften its hold on my heart. And in that moment, I realized that forgiveness wasn't about excusing what had happened. It was about freeing myself from the weight of it. I forgive you, Mom, I said. And I meant it. She passed not long after. We held a small service, nothing grand, just a gathering of those who had known and loved her. I didn't speak at the funeral. I didn't need to. My goodbye had already been said, my peace already made. Life moved on, as it always does. Our daughter grew, blossoming into a young woman full of promise and passion. She inherited her mother's compassion and, I like to think, a bit of my resilience. When she left for college, I felt that same ache my father must have felt when I left home, at the bittersweet pride of watching your child take their first steps into the world without you. Emily and I grew older together. Our hair grayed, our pace slowed, but our love deepened. We found comfort in the quiet moments, reading side by side, tending the garden, watching the sunrise and set from the porch where so many of our dreams had been dreamed and shared. Sometimes I still think about that old house. About the boy I was when I lived there, and the man I became after I left. I think about the way life surprises you, how it can break your heart, yes, but also how it can heal it in ways you never expected. How the home you build with your own hands and heart will always matter more than the one you inherit. And on those evenings, when the light is soft and the world feels still, I whisper a quiet thank you to my father. For the lessons he gave me. For the strength he left me. For the reminder that no matter what is taken from you, no one can take away your ability to build again. I have built, and I have found home, not in a house, not in a place, but in the people I love, and in the life we've made together. And that, I know now, is the greatest inheritance of all.